Now it's time for our first speaker, Florida Realtors Chief Economist and head of its Industry Data and Analysis Department. He oversees the research which provides realtors, the media, and public with comprehensive Florida real estate statistics, as well as analyses of issues and trends that impacts the state's economy. Please welcome, from Orlando, Brad O'Connor.
All right, so it's great to be down here, second year in a row, and it was a lovely event last year. We've got even more people this year, so it's nice to see all your faces out here. Today, let's talk about what's going on in the real estate market. And obviously, we're not having the same year we did last year. I think that's pretty evident to everybody. So I'm going to try to focus. I'm going to be very negative, but I'm going to be very negative for a short period of time at the beginning, and then we'll talk about all the positive stuff that's going on after that. So we'll leave feeling better. And by negative, I mean, let's look at where sales are this year. First, let's look at 2018 and 2019. I've got them up on the chart right now. This is for Collier County here in Naples and the surrounding area. And you can see in 2018 and 2019, those are what normal years in real estate in Collier County look like. Okay, so you've got your spring buying season, and then there's the rest of the year. Then in 2020, we have the pandemic. First of all, you are off to a great start in 2020, and it was for many of you, I was hearing saying, this is our best winter buying season ever, right? As the pandemic just starting. So you were off to a great start, well above where you were in 2019. Then the pandemic comes, you take the big hit like everyone did. And then like everyone else around the state, you have an incredible second half of the year. The housing market really takes off. But that didn't prepare us for 2021. We thought 2020 was crazy by the end of the year. And then 2021, your growth, I know I'm not going to say you guys had the most growth in sales in 2021 in the state because I don't have that memorized. But if I looked, I wouldn't be surprised if you did. Just in terms of the sheer number of sales, you virtually doubled how many sales you had in 2021 versus previous years. Now there's this year, not as much fun. I tried, when I was here last year, I really did try to, gently nudge everybody and say, and I think most of you understood this was what would happen, is that last year was a special time, right? That wasn't the future of real estate in Florida last year. That was, for a while, we're going to have crazy sales, and that's what happened. But now we've reverted in some ways to the norm, and in some ways we are very much not normal still. As of July, the latest data I have to share with you, you're actually below your 2018 level of sales for July. That's okay because you're not alone. Much of the state is suffering in that way. January through July closed sales over there on the right. We are above where we were in 2018 through 2020. But if we maintain this current rate at which we're below 2018 levels, we might actually see fewer sales than we did in any of those 3 years. I would point out one fact, though. During any of those years, were there zero sales? No. So don't get too wrapped up with it. There's still lots of sales going on. The media and all the headlines we're going to see are going to be really depressing. Sales are down this much. There's still a lot of sales. Not as many as last year. We're not going to see that again for a while. But unless you're just planning on not having any sales next year, I can't tell if that's your mindset. I don't know what to say. But new pending sales. So this is a little more forward-looking than closed sales, as all of you know. Stuff has to go pending before it closes. So looking there, also the last 3 months, we're seeing, we're coming in below 2018. So this is probably a trend that continues. I said you're not alone. Here's closed sales for Florida overall in July, below 2018 levels. And new pending sales for Florida, same deal. So you're not weird in terms of the state. Everyone's feeling this right now. And in fact, Florida is not alone. If you look at the national real estate market, if you look at the international real estate market for residential housing, look at New Zealand, Australia, Canada, all those places, experiencing the same kinds of things. All of these economies are experiencing inflation. All of them are seeing their central banks raise interest rates. All of them are seeing housing slow down. But just to rub it in one more time before we start to get a little more positive, mortgage applications last 3 months, just like the pending sales chart overall for the state, down. So no matter where you look in the data, we're a little bit below 2018 levels. So why is all this home buyer demand falling? Some of the answers are obvious. Rarely do we get as an economist, where really would I get, or Elliot or Lawrence get the opportunity to look at something and say, wow, there's one very clear reason why this is happening in the economy. Usually people have theories about like the labor market right now. Why is it so tight? Some people say it's because we gave people too much free money last year. Some people say it's because women can't return to the workforce because it's so hard to find daycare. All of those factors, the economists are studying them and they keep finding very mixed results on all of them. We can't really figure out why the labor market is the way it is. We can figure out why there's fewer sales this year. We can figure out that by just looking at what happened to the interest rates. 30-year fixed rate mortgage. This is data back to 2012. So back to our most recent all-time low in terms of 30-year fixed rate mortgages, that was 2012. Draw a line across there. We almost got back to it in 2016, but it was really 2020. This period in time was just ridiculous. Such a sustained period of time where nobody who currently owned a home had a rate that low, and nobody who had not yet to buy a home could ever dream of getting a rate that low. And not only were they able to get those rates or refi to those rates, they were able to do it for almost 2 years. So for almost 2 years, we've got all of this demand just surging. Then the next year into 2022, we have our rates shoot up. I'm zooming out now, so the red area that I have circled here is our last chart, but now let's zoom out. And a lot of people, one of the favorite hobbies I've noticed among more experienced realtors around the state is to regale the younger realtors with tales of how high interest rates were in the early 1980s. So you're not the only person who does it. But it is incredible, right, that rates were that high. And we've had this long-term tailwind in our housing industry where rates have just been gradually going down. Most of the time, you could buy your next home probably for a lower rate than you got your last home. In the grand scheme of things, our jump up from like 3% interest rates to around 6% interest rates, it's not a huge shift. But I guess what sets it apart in my mind is how rapid it was, right? So it wasn't just that we went from 3 to 6%. It happened in like 2 months. That was part of the shock that I don't think any of us saw coming. And that really, I think, people have been priced out of the market because of this, but I think there's also people sitting on the sidelines because they're still shell shocked from what happened and trying to figure out how the market is really going to respond. But yeah, even if you look by historical standards, we're not that high in terms of our interest rate, but then again, prices don't usually go up 40% in 2 years either. Looking at median sale price here on the top, this is our statewide data, single family going back to 1993. There's a clear kink in our median sale price chart here right when the pandemic starts. Prices just immediately started going up more rapidly than they had. But it's been at a steady pace. If you compare that to what the median monthly mortgage payment would be on that median priced home, because we had such low rates the first 2 years of the pandemic, the actual monthly payment didn't go up very much. Not only that, but all of the millennials were finally able to get down payments because they put all their money in crypto. So they were all, so we had a lot of home buying going on. We have that huge surge. And despite the fact that, by 2021, home prices are going up 20% year over year, didn't matter because the rates were so low, the monthly payment really wasn't changed. It only really affected your down payment. 2021, great. That's why we had such a huge surge in sales. That's why this year we're feeling pain because the rates went up along with prices going up at the same rate they were a year ago. So imagine going up from maybe an $1,100 or $1,200 payment for the median price home in Florida. Now you're looking at like an $1,800 or $1,900 payment. And it's not just affecting those who are on the edge of renting or buying. It's affecting anyone interested in financing any kind of real estate all across the board, from the luxury segments down to the more affordable segments. I gotta pop this open. I'm not used to, I wasn't anticipating having to sing first. So mortgage rates, obviously the big one. I know Lawrence and Elliot are going to focus more on that. In fact, Lawrence and Elliot are probably the better people to focus on some of these next few factors because they are macro in nature and that's what they're going to be covering. But just got to make the point that consumer price inflation, particularly among those on a budget, that's really eating into their savings. They're going to cut out luxury items or things they don't really need first. But at some point, you have to start making tough decisions. If prices have gone up as much as they have, how much milk do I buy? Do I buy chicken instead of beef because beef is expensive? Things like that. Those start to pile up, and eventually housing might be part of the stuff that you have to make a sacrifice on. The economic uncertainty I already mentioned. We've had a shaky stock market this year, not going in the same direction it did last year. That gives people pause. Worries about how fast these interest rates went up and what the future of the housing market is, because everything is always a little bit uncertain, is going to cause people to pause. One thing that I think is specific to Florida, though, is that another reason why our demand is falling, and perhaps our demand might be falling a little bit faster than other parts of the country, is because we had such high demand last year from out-of-state buyers that a lot of other states didn't have that luxury. Some of that's easing, and I'm only going to say it's not down to pre-pandemic levels. I think it's still well above that. But in terms of, remember the last major COVID surge we had in early 2021 with Omicron's first surge. Back then, if you remember, every time we had a big surge up north, tons of Northerners would flock down to buy. And they're still flocking down to buy, just not in numbers like we saw concentrated when we were having those COVID waves. So that's declined a little bit. So you're seeing a little bit less from up there. It doesn't mean it's gone away at all. You also have some companies dragging their workers kicking and screaming back to the office where, they thought maybe they might buy a property in Florida if they could get away with not working in the office ever again. Some of those people are being pulled back in. Mortgage applications, again, the same data I showed you earlier, but this is just for non-primary home purchases. This goes to show you how much, normally we associate our cash sales metrics with investors and second home buyers, but mortgage applications, have made it, a very viable option for investors too, or the mortgage rates being so low made it a very viable option. But you can see that we've had accelerated activity here in Florida in terms of buyers of non-primary homes. That's investors, that's second home buyers, that's in-migration. All of that slowing down a little bit. So, okay, I'm done with the negative part. Sorry that took so long, but let's talk about all, what we have going for us, because we just have to be real about where we're at. Florida is still the hot place to be right now. If you read any articles in national media, they're still talking about how people want to go to Florida. Now, to be fair, some of these articles have said that for several years. Like when the SALT cap was put into place, you saw tons of articles with angry people saying, well, I'm moving to Florida, but that never showed up in the data. You'd see some very high profile people move to Florida, but since the SALT cap really only helps you if you're making a lot of money and you have a very expensive home, it didn't really move the needle. COVID moved the needle. So I'm going to show you a couple charts on that, but just overall, our job growth continues to be superb, and so does our population growth. We're seeing a resurgence in that. That's always going to put upward pressure on the real estate market because we need to house more people. Millennials reaching their prime home buying age, that story is done and overdone. Everyone's been hearing that story for a few years, but it's not like it's not coming to pass. This huge generation of people has moved into their prime first-time home buying years. They're a very real generation. They do exist. But I think, it's been maybe not talked about as much as how much larger our senior population has grown in the United States, and particularly here in Florida. So I've got an age distribution chart here. The blue line is, actually these are flipped because I think your default PowerPoint colors got flipped with mine. So the blue line is actually 2020 and the green line is 2011. So just look at it that way. So the blue line is our population roughly now or 2 years ago of people of all these different ages. So you've got first our millennial generation, much larger than the Gen Xers who occupied that spot 10 years prior. So a lot more people to house in that age bracket. But then look at this one. This is what surprised me because I've been just reading articles about how many millennials there are compared to Gen Xers, but look how many more seniors and late prime age workers we have here in Florida compared to 10 years ago. That's a significantly larger population. So we've got all these empty nest households competing with all these fledgling households. Either their kids have moved out or they haven't had their kids yet, and they're all going to compete for the same size homes. mostly because I think the seniors falsely believe that their children will come to visit them. So maybe they'll get one extra bedroom, but they won't use it. I struck a chord here in Naples. I'm going to make a note of that. Payroll employment. The U.S. finally got back to where it was before the pandemic. Florida, we got there last year, and we went well above, which is good because really what we want to do is get back not to where we were, but where we should have been at this point. When we've still got a ways to go to get there nationally, but Florida's getting pretty close to getting back to our pre-pandemic trend. And if you dig further into the data, you find a lot of our employment growth has been in fairly well-paying sectors of the job market. So finance and professional business services, science, things like that. So we're definitely pulling people down and into Florida. We've got skyrocketing rental prices. This is a national phenomenon, but it's particularly heated in Florida. If you look at any regional data on rents, Florida, all the Florida metros are beating everybody else. And that's just because on top of rents going up nationally for macro reasons, we've got so many people coming into the state that are putting even more pressure on rents. The share of workforce working remotely remains elevated. So I already touched on this as something that's not as big as a deal as it was last year, but I think this is a big deal permanently for Florida going forward. Yeah, we're not seeing everybody from Manhattan come down and look at a Florida home this year, but we're still seeing a lot of them, and a lot of them did make the move and are telling their friends. This is one of those things like Facebook or something else where Facebook's value is not very much if only 5 people use Facebook. Where Facebook gets its values because everyone uses it, right? Well, so you got to snowball and reach a critical mass to really take something off. I think we've got like a pretty good snowball going on in Florida in terms of New Yorkers and Northerners who've moved down here in the past year or two. And it might grow a little bit more slowly from here for a while, but if we can reach a critical mass, it can, really take off again. So I think, that's something you want to keep an eye out for. And if you got any buddies from up north who've moved down recently, just nudge them every once in a while and ask where their friends are. And we also have, this is slower than we thought it would happen, but we do have international buyers returning to some degree. One of the data sets I've been looking at lately, we don't have great immigration data for Florida from outside of the state or outside of the country. Except from the Census Bureau and the IRS, but their data sets don't come out until 2 years after the fact. So I'm still waiting on that to figure out what happened in 2020. But so the fashionable thing as an economist to do these last 2 years has been to try to find any data set you can that might proxy what's going on with migration. My latest favorite one is these driver's license exchanges. So when you establish yourself as a Florida resident, you have 30 days to turn in your old license from your previous point of origin and get your Florida license. Okay, so clearly you can see there's one state in particular that stands out here in terms of people coming to Florida, but in percentage terms, we've actually seen pretty good growth in all of these markets or all of these states coming into Florida. Like California, look how small that number was prior to the pandemic, and it's actually gone up by quite a bit. I was joking about how. I think last year, maybe here I was joking about how the percentage growth in terms of Californians coming into Florida was very significant, but in terms of the overall number, because we started from a low base, it wasn't like there were a lot of Californians really coming in. And probably a couple of weeks after I said that, Californians bought the house next door to me and started renting it out. Not only that, but places like California and like the Northeast, particularly New York, we've seen from previous data from the Postal Service, a lot of the change of address forms are coming from Manhattan and Brooklyn, very densely populated parts of the New York metro area in particular, where it was not any fun to be during the pandemic. So I can come out and tell you a truth like this. Florida's median sale price has indeed increased by 40% in the past 2 years as of July. But then a typical New Yorker, and this is a simulation, oh yeah, to what? So it doesn't matter what the price, the percentage growth was, what do I have to pay for a house here in Florida? Well, about half the homes sell for $380,000 or less. To which the New Yorker will automatically say, forget about it. What a bargain. Florida, here I come. And then the Statue of Liberty torch will turn into a mimosa. That's exactly how it happens. I know a lot of you have witnessed this in the past year. So it's cheap, right? It's a bargain for them. So whereas, your typical Floridian is thinking, oh my gosh, it's 40% more now from California or New York or Boston or wherever, this is cheap still. So you're still seeing activity from these parts of the country. Now I'm showing you the same data. I'm adding in the foreign country element to it because they do track foreign exchanges of licenses. If you're wondering about 2017, that was Puerto Rico being struck by Maria. So we had a huge influx from there. But if you look at the rest of the foreign country chart, you can see we're kind of back to the same level we had before. Now, remember, a lot of these folks aren't necessarily home buyers. A lot of them are going to be renters or whatnot, at least at first. So if you do look at the latest foreign data, a lot of the foreign influx that we've had is from, does anyone know? We've had a huge increase in migration from Cuba this year. And also from Colombia. Colombia just elected a leftist government, and there's some people who feel like that's going in the wrong direction and they want to move assets up here. So we're seeing movement, particularly from Latin America. Canadians are back to a degree, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of movement in Western Europe yet. So maybe we're seeing some more than we were, but we're going to be looking at this data a little more closely over the next few months to see. I can give you the Collier County version. It's a little bit more messy, but you've got just as many people coming from Chicago as you do from New York. So and then Jersey and Massachusetts. So those are kind of your bread and butter right now, and all of those have seen huge increases. And then there's kind of a second tier of the large Rust Belt states plus California. And then your foreign movement. I think I was looking in the data here. This is a lot of particularly Cuba and other and Venezuela. I think were the two big ones. So again, depending on the data that you're looking at, it's showing signs that at least there's some in-migration happening from other countries. The United States population growth has slowed to a big crawl, in large part because immigration has. So that eventually hurts our ability to see GDP grow in the long run. So just something to keep an eye on. Median price of closed existing home sales. In January, we were up 40% year over year here in Collier County. And in May, it was as big as 39% growth. This is much bigger than much of the state. Oh, excuse me. But only 9% here in July. We can't automatically assume that this is because home values are only increasing 9%. I think the mix of the type of housing that's selling is also shifting fairly dramatically, and that can always mess up the median. So we got to wait for the price indexes to come out in a few months' time. But clearly, I know you guys are seeing more price reductions than you had before, and buyers or sellers are starting to have to, deal with the cold hard reality that they have to shift their expectations a little bit. So definitely seeing a slowdown here. This is more pronounced than what we're seeing in a lot of the rest of the state. Overall, statewide, I think our peak growth this year over year was only 25%. I say only 25% as if that, and in July it was 18%. Now, again, much of the rest of the state has a much more affordable market than this one. So that's probably why you're seeing a lot of that shift. The luxury market, kind of the first market to really slow down. And so you guys were kind of at the forefront, just like you were at the forefront of our recovery. You're just always early to stuff. I don't know what it is. But if we're worried about, the future of the market, I know a lot of people are getting questions and have been for several years now about, where we are in the cycle and how this cycle compares to the previous one. Well, there's a lot of things that actually set it apart. Here in Florida, just look at our foreclosure rate and our 90-day delinquency rate here. The blue lines, the percentage of our mortgages that were delinquent was close to 18%, like those mortgage rates in the 80s. So almost a fifth of our loans were delinquent, and 12% of our loans were in foreclosure at one time in 2012. Okay. If we're competing with other states, we were doing pretty good. in terms of how high we got those numbers. So that's the first thing you want to look at. First, ignore shark fin number one. That's just Irma, very temporary disruption. Shark fin number two is the pandemic. So we don't even get close to what we did in terms of delinquencies with the pandemic. Not only that, but all these delinquencies, they're counted as delinquent in this data set, but they're all in forbearance. They're all in forbearance, and they're working things out with their lenders. And that's why the orange line doesn't move at all in that box, right? The foreclosure rate, it stayed low. I just gave away the answer to my question, but I was going to ask if you guys could you could identify the third recession on this chart, the one that I haven't talked about yet. It's the dot-com recession, because I keep hearing people say, well, Brad, okay, fine. So foreclosures aren't going to explode for the same reason as last time, but we're going to see a lot of them when we have our recession that's coming up, possibly. Okay, well, there's a recession. What happened to foreclosures? Well, if you look really carefully, they went from like 1.5% to maybe 1.9%. So the media probably put out a thing that said, foreclosures are up by 33%. Which would have been true, but they were very low. So that's what a recession looks like, and that's what foreclosures look like in a recession. In a normal one, at least. Because we don't have subprime loans this time. We have great credit compared to what we had last time in terms of the people who own the homes now. The loan types they have, look at, this is purchase applications by loan type over time, going back to 2011. So after the great financial crisis, ARMs disappeared for the most part. We were mostly fixed rate now, mostly 30-year fixed rate. So the top chart here, between 80 and 90% of our mortgage applications are for 30-year fixed rate loans. It's dropped a little bit over this past year. And most of that went into these hybrid ARMs, these 5-1 ARMs that will adjust after 5 years. I'm going to highlight it there in case you can't see it. That's our massive increase in ARMs that we're having because these rates went up. So it's not going to make a dent in terms of the credit profile of our homeowners. So without that kind of thing on the horizon where maybe your rate could go up or your payments would double unexpectedly, we don't have that. Your payments are locked in for the most part if you're a homeowner now. So it's going to take a lot to get you to have to sell your home if you don't want to, and if you think you want to wait. So in terms of supply, I know that Elliot and Lawrence are going to talk about building, so I won't talk about it too much, but I'm just going to say that, indications are that, yeah, we're building a lot now, but we have a long way to go to make up for what we missed out on. And right now, I think, other than getting rid of the existing inventory or existing under construction homes, which might put a little bit of extra inventory on the market, I think the builders are done building until I think the rate environment gets a little more favorable. So we're not going to have, in the longer run, any more housing. We've still got a housing shortage problem. The only way out of it is building. We're not going to do that for a while. New listings have basically been the same during the pandemic as they were before the pandemic in many markets. Here, they were actually a little bit elevated. But they've actually tailed off a little bit in the last month or two. That could change again, but we're just seeing a reversion back to where we were. So there's not a whole lot of extra existing home inventory coming onto the market. As a result, even though inventory was finally going up early this year, now that new listings have slowed down, and of course sales are down now, but the drop in new listings is counteracting that, so the inventory is flattening out. We're not necessarily going to get back to 2018 or 2019 levels of inventory for a while. What that's going to create is a giant pit of sharks who are going to wait for maybe the price level to slow down, maybe even drop in some areas, but it won't drop very far before the sharks start leaping out of the water, because there's all these people with unfulfilled demand who couldn't get a home when rates were still low, who are just going to wait for the right opportunity. Median days on market, you can see that's finally ticked up to 22 days, which is still very short for your market. But that's just showing that people are starting to have to make some price adjustments. But let me close out with the most positive slide I have, which is dollar volume. Because, yeah, we talked about at the beginning of my talk, we're going to be below 2018 levels of sales. That's just going to happen. Prices are still 40% higher than they were 2 years ago. So if you actually look at it from a business perspective, you have quite a while. The rest of this year, there's a good chance you're going to be making well more than you made in 2019 in terms of commissions, on average. Not all of you, but on the most part, if we average you all out, that's what's going to happen. So just bear that in mind, that for a while now, we still have an advantage there. And with that, I would love to pass it on to Jeff again to introduce Lawrence,
who's coming to us from Washington via Zoom today. He's very familiar to all realtors. He's the chief economist for the National Association of REALTORS. He's also the senior vice president of research, including existing home statistics, existing home sales, affordability index, and home buyers and sellers profiles. He regularly provides commentary on real estate market trends for our 1.4 million realtor members. He also creates forecasts and participates in many economic panels, among them the Wall Street Journal and Harvard. Please welcome the esteemed Dr. Lawrence Yun.
Hello, everyone. I think the technology is working. I will assume it is working until someone tells me otherwise. But very good afternoon. I know the room that you are in because I was there in person a couple of times in the past. Unfortunately, this year, as I am requested to do so many Zoom interviews, it's very difficult to do travel. And maybe next year, I can be in your area, just lovely area next year. Well, in Washington, there's many things going on. I think the most important thing is that the Federal Reserve is set to do another big interest rate increase in a few weeks. And then another one after the midterm elections, and then probably another one in early 2023 before stopping and possibly some reduction in interest rate late in 2023. That depends on the path of the inflation. If the inflation can come down, we can make the adjustment quickly. But if the inflation lingers, and when I say inflation, I am looking at consumer price inflation, home prices, interestingly, something that Brad mentioned, wow, 40% increase in home prices in Florida past 2 years. Well, that is not counted as consumer price inflation. It's not part of that equation, but just the overall consumer price inflation. You go to grocery store, you are frustrated. You go to gas station, you are angry. So trying to bring that consumer price inflation to manageable levels. And if so, the Federal Reserve does not need to be so aggressive. But so far, all the information is 75 basis point increase in a couple of weeks, and then another probably 50 basis point increase in after midterm elections, and another one in early 23. So that is the expectation on what Washington will be doing related to Federal Reserve. Let me give you how I see the market developing. With that, I speak better with PowerPoint slides. So let me put that onto the screen. With Brad, Elliot, myself, economists, economists look at many similar items. So there could be slight repetition in some points. But the reinforcement of these ideas, I think this is good. And to the degree that there is any disagreement among us, I think that's always very healthy to see why we would disagree on certain aspects. So let's first start with the broader economy. We are in an economic recession. At least I think so, because when I took Econ 101 course, we always said 2 consecutive quarters of a decline is an economic recession. So you see, in the first quarter of this year, second quarter of this year, it is negative. Now, it is mildly negative. It's not any big negative. It's just mildly negative. So that would essentially say we are in an economic recession. But some people are saying, no, this is not. We have to wait until the committee decides. And there's a group of economists who will determine probably 18 months from now. But who cares what they say 18 months from now? We want to know what's happening today. And it's 2 consecutive quarters of decline. But note how mild current changes are compared to the early data points. The early data point shows a huge whiplash reaction from COVID and reopening of the economy. So when the economy shut down, everything collapsed, no economic activity. And then when the economy reopened, for which Florida was one of the very early states to reopen, the economy began to come around, and then some positive before turning negative in the recent 2 quarters. If it is a recession, it will be the most bizarre recession of all time. Because, let me go advance, because we are in a labor shortage. The blue line reflects total job openings in the economy, help wanted signs. At hotels, help wanted. At restaurants, help wanted. I know many hotels. I know you are local residents, or you are going back home tonight. But for visitors to Naples, they're staying at a hotel, and they will say, no, we cannot clean your room every night. It will be every 3 days. Those would be the criteria, because they just don't have enough staff to handle it. You see it at the restaurant. Help wanted sign is far higher than people searching for a job, reflected in the orange line. So by almost 2-to-1 ratio, we have more jobs than unemployed. This does not mean that there are some friction in the marketplace. If you are a mortgage lender and recently lost your job because refinance business has completely dried up, and the mortgage lending industry, they are laying off workers, well, you are not going to take that job from 7-Eleven or at the hotel. So trying to get that right job match is going to take some time. So just because there's plenty of job openings does not mean immediate filling of those jobs. But nonetheless, it is a bizarre recession, because recession means more unemployed, very few job openings, but that's not the case right now. In terms of at least some type of job, it is plentiful. If we look at 50 states map, it looks like the following, and someone in the back may not be able to see it, so I will read the numbers to you. Florida, easy to identify. It says 4.8%. So what does the 4.8% imply? In the state of Florida, there's 4.8% more people with job today compared to March 2020, when that ugly COVID came to the country. So before COVID, Florida was doing well. Well, today you have 4.8% more jobs compared to March 2020. So this is a high performance activity in the state of Florida. Georgia plus 3.8, Texas plus 4.8 is color coded. So the bluish color states, they have more jobs today compared to pre-COVID. While the red color states, they're actually down. For example, New York, Brad shows the data, how many New Yorkers are coming to Florida. Well, in New York, there is 2.4% fewer jobs today compared to pre-COVID. So variation across the country. And one of the key factors for this variation, I would say, is the degree of reopening of the economy. So the states that reopen the economy sooner have more jobs, while the state that was sluggish, like Pennsylvania, Michigan, New York, they're all down. Now, other red states, so I should say, I don't want to go into politics. I'm just using this job number part. So other red color state that is red is oil producing states. So Louisiana is down, North Dakota is down, and Alaska is down, because many oil companies are saying, look, Washington, things that politicians are saying from Washington is saying they want to kill oil companies. And if that is the case, why should we invest so much in new pipeline, new drilling? So the caution among oil drilling companies are leading to job reduction in some of the oil producing states. Texas is so well diversified, oil is not as important as before. But that's the reason also why you are angry at the gas station, because we're not producing enough oil. Now, certainly Naples is beautiful. I would not like to see any oil rigs right outside of Naples beach area. You don't want to see that. But in some areas like Alaska, North Dakota, where there's hardly no one living, well, if we could drill oil, why not? But to the degree that we're not drilling oil, is making the oil prices a little higher than what it could be. Now, green energy is definitely important. We need to transition over to green energy, but still it makes a very tiny fraction bulk. 90% or better energy is coming from carbon fuel, and we cannot quickly dismiss the carbon fuel overnight. So that's the job performance with Florida doing better. If we look at specifically at your area, Naples, Immokalee, Marco Island. So this is what the job number looks like over the past 22 years, from year 2000, turn of the century. There were less than 100,000 people with job in the Naples region in the year 2000. Then there was an increase, and then you faced foreclosure crisis, so you lost a job right in the middle of the graph. And then again, rising before COVID disruption. Now you have more job compared to pre-COVID condition. And the total job numbers are about 60,000 or 65,000 more jobs now compared to year 2000. So these are quite remarkable growth given the relative size of your local market, which is the reason why home prices have took off, because you have so many people moving into the region, many retirees. Retirees don't want a job. But retirees go to restaurants, retirees need nurses, retirees need financial advisors. So all that support staff job creation is needed along with the home building construction job. So Naples job creation has been quite remarkable. But housing market, at least from the beginning of the year, is showing some declines. So this is the pending home sales contract. We know not all pending leads to closing. There are some canceled contracts, very frustrating. I mean, you feel like tearing your hair out when the contract is canceled, but it occurs. But still, it is a very good leading indicator about actual commission income and the closing activity. So what you see on the chart is the red line shows right before COVID what it was. Then we had the disruption from the lockdown. Once the lockdown was lifted, reopening, home sales surged way beyond pre-COVID days. So there was 2 years of remarkable performance before beginning of this year, steadily declining. Why is it declining? We all know. Your clients are completely surprised about the impact of higher mortgage rates. I wish every governors across the country would put some degree of financial literacy into their high school curriculum to say, you have to learn this. And what is this? Mortgage calculator. Punch in the number and see how fast monthly payment changed from small changes in mortgage rates. So the mortgage rate was 3% last year, and now it's essentially knocking on the door for 6%, which is the reason why sales are going down. You know, some people who don't have mortgage calculator, okay, 3%, 4%, 5%, what's the big deal? Well, you punch in the number and it is a very big deal. Now, fortunately, in your area, there is a larger than normal amount of cash buyers because New Yorkers, Chicago, San Francisco, they sell their home, expensive home, and come into the market all cash. So, you know, cash buyers are very immune. But still, mortgage borrowers are still a significant size of the market, and the sales are coming down because of higher mortgage rates. So this is directly off the website from the Naples Board of Realtors. So they have all the good data, and you probably are aware of this data. Brad covered all the other data points. But overall showing that inventory has risen, 88% increase. Percentage-wise, it looks like a big increase, but it is still below 2019. I mean, you just did not have any inventory last year, and now you are beginning to have some number. But the pending contracts, you are falling more than the rest of the country. Rest of the country is down about 20%, but you are down 34%. One thing that I am noticing is that expensive markets are seeing larger decline in pending. So San Francisco, New York, New Jersey, and some of the expensive areas seeing larger decline in pending because mortgage calculator, that impact is much more impactful or negatively impactful on higher priced homes. So that is the condition currently in your marketplace. If we look at the price appreciation, there's all different price measurement. You know, Brad went over the median price. What I'm looking at here is loans that is backed by Freddie and Fannie, which means it doesn't cover all homes. But of the homes that are covered by Freddie and Fannie, what they do is they don't look at the median price. They do something called repeat price index. So the same property, they see what it was when the first loan was originated, say in 1990. Then the home buyer or home sellers change. So in 1998, say after 8 years, another mortgage was taken out and they see the valuation. So for the same property, what is happening to the price? And they average that across all properties in Naples for which they have the data, and is showing that prices are up better than 30%. So very similar to median price, but I thought that it would be interesting to show also repeat price measurement. Now, one thing to note is that current increases looks like similar to what happened in 2005, 2006, earlier part of the graph. And then what happened? There was a foreclosure crisis and prices plunged. Could it happen? Well, people who don't know the background, who just look at the graph may say, it's a possibility. But we have to look beyond the graph. And the beyond the graph is we don't have overabundance of inventory, oversupply situation. That's not the case. And another big difference is that, thank goodness, we don't have subprime, funny, risky mortgages. People who took out a mortgage are of sound credit. In fact, I would say to you to recontact your clients over the past 2 years, shake their hand one more time and say, congratulations. Weren't you lucky to lock in that 3% mortgage rates? It's about building relationships so that maybe they know a friend who's going to move from Chicago and say, look, I work with this realtors. I have a home, 3% mortgage rate. And because of that feeling of building wealth, locking in low rates, they feel good. And that feeling good will essentially transmit over to you. And of course, you did a fantastic job in getting the home for them. So remind your past clients what right decision they made, and just a good reminder that they have made that terrific decision. I mentioned the Federal Reserve will be raising interest rates. So the red line is what the Fed controls. It's the interest rate, not for you and me, but for the banking system. But the blue line is what we are interested in. That's the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. And today's data is showing that it is the highest since 2008. So it's highest in more than a decade. So it's rising. But one thing to note is the following. Look at the middle of the graph. In the middle of the graph, you see that red line goes down, goes up, goes down, yet the blue line barely changed. So it is possible that when the Federal Reserve changes their policy, that the mortgage rate could remain very stable. Of course, it's not the current case. In fact, currently, mortgage rates are responding violently to any hint of further changes. But my best guess is that the reason why mortgage rates shot up quickly is they knew that the Federal Reserve would be raising interest rates multiple times. People know inflation is high, meaning that Federal Reserve will be super aggressive. So the mortgage market is trying to price in all this future action. So in September, in a couple of weeks, when the Federal Reserve raised interest rates, mortgage rate may not change all that much because it already priced in. Same thing after the midterm election, same thing in early. So I think the most of the increase in mortgage rates have already occurred, and it will be very small movement from this point onwards. I think the home base for mortgage rate would be about 5.5% to 6%, maybe 6.2%, and just bounce around that level. I don't foresee 7% mortgage rate, even though the Federal Reserve is saying they will raise interest rate. The mortgage market already priced in that conditions. Here's what realtors across the country are doing. Every local market is unique, so Naples is certainly very, very unique and special. But across all MLSs, we've been tabulating the number. What we find is that half of the homes are being sold at list price or above, but the other half needs a price concession to sign the contract. And this shows the relationship with the days on the market. So what other realtors across the countries are doing. So on the first week, to the degree that there is some price negotiation, price reduction is 5%. In 1 month, price reduction is 7%. But if home sits on the market for longer than 3 months, price reduction is 11%. So the actual data, how much price reduction from the list before signing the contract, which means that you need to price the home correctly. If you get that home sellers, congratulations. Next meeting will require what is the price, list price. If you misprice the list price, well, it's going to stay on the market for a long period. Price reduction, price concession, and before you know it, it could be 11% lower before finding a new buyer. So understand the market condition. You are the experts in looking at your neighborhood specifically, but this would be the overall condition. The data that is always worth emphasizing and re-emphasizing, especially to the first-time buyers. I think the first-time buyers know they want to buy a home. The reason why they're not buying is they are priced out. Higher mortgage rate, they simply cannot make the numbers work. Based on their income, it doesn't work. But to the degree that there are some renters who have the financial capacity but refuse to buy, you have to show this chart. It shows that homeowners build wealth over time. According to Brad, 40% price increase in 2 years, that is a huge gain in wealth. Just consider, the home owner just a couple of years ago versus now. But this is showing, according to the Federal Reserve, what the wealth gap between homeowners and renters. To be very specific, the blue bar, the middle bar, is the actual data from the Federal Reserve. But that's 2019. Federal Reserve has not updated the figure. They will, I'm not sure when it's coming out, but I know prices have increased tremendously since then. So my estimate, based on reasonable assumption, is that homeowners probably have around $320,000 in wealth. Given Naples region, Marco Island is much more expensive. I mean, you are looking at $500,000 or even higher net worth for homeowners in your area. But just huge, vast difference between wealth between homeowners and renters. So any renters who have the financial capacity but refuse to buy, I would say they are not making a right decision, because we know the home prices will be rising, and 6% mortgage rates. Well, let me think. My parents, they bought their first home when the mortgage rate was 15%, and that was one of their best financial decision ever, because home prices steadily increased, and when the mortgage rate went down, they could refinance downward, because we know the mortgage rate goes up, but it also goes down, and when it goes down, one can always refinance downwards. And when I bought my first home, mortgage rates were 8%. It was the best decision. And I will give credit to my wife, because she insisted we have to buy. I was a little hesitant, but once we bought it, it turns out that it was the best decision ever financially. Showing tremendous wealth difference between homeowners and renters. Inventory levels are very low. Another thing to show to your potential buyers who think, oh, home prices will crash. No, we don't have inventory. Yes, inventory levels are rising, but even with the recent increases, it is still way below the normal condition, and definitely not the case of 2006, 2007 conditions, where you had an oversupply. Back then, 4 million homes available. Today, we have only about 1 million homes available on the market. I remember the front page of the Miami Herald, where it said there is something like 40 years supply of inventory back during the foreclosure crisis. 40 years supply. I mean, those are scary numbers. But people who bought right at that time, I think they are smiling big at the moment, because prices were falling condition. But today, with such a tight inventory, don't expect prices to decline. And maybe some markets like California, where it's super, super expensive, maybe they see some price adjustment. But it's no big deal in terms of causing market distress or foreclosure crisis because it went up so much, it's super expensive. So any reduction in, say, 5-10% price reduction in San Francisco, I don't think it will cause any great concern to the financial industry or to the homeowners in that area, other than just few buyers who bought right at the peak. But I think the prices will, after the drop, will go back up again. It's not going to be a sustained decline. It will only be a temporary decline. In the Naples region, I doubt that you will even see a decline. But if it does decline somewhat, it will be very modest and temporary. And those people who buy at those temporary dip in prices, they will come out well ahead into the future. The building activity, something that Elliot may go into, I'm not sure, because again, we did not speak to each other, which is good for you, which means we are making, nothing consensus. So to the degree that we have disagreement, it's all good that you are getting fresh perspective. So inventory build, the supply is rising, as you can see. But the increase in supply of the builders, which is the reason why they're becoming very cautious, not wanting to build more, is homes that is either under construction or they have a housing permit for. So they have a housing permit and now they're trying to sell that empty lot and they are saying, okay, we want to build, but who's going to buy this? And right now they are not finding so many buyers or saying cancel contracts. Because unlike existing home, once people buy those new homes under construction, you don't know when it will finish. In 6 months, 9 months, will the garage door arrive on time? So all that question. And in the meantime, mortgage rates are changing. And that's why you have cancel contracts. But look at the red line. On the homes that the builders actually completed, ready to go on the market, inventory levels are very low. So what the consumers are saying is they're hesitant to buy under construction, but they want to buy a home once it's all ready and done. So very low inventory regarding the finished homes on the market. And consequently, I would say the builders, I know sometimes you have to take a risk. I would say go ahead and build more because there's a housing shortage. I know right now mortgage rates are higher, there's cancel contracts, but once you finish, you are selling it and you are selling at a profit. So I would encourage builders to build. The single family construction is on the right-hand side. And what you see on the right-hand side is first, no overproduction like back in 2006 or 2005. So you see much more subdued. It's been rising, but in a subdued way. But in 2022, the green bar, I think is going to be a little down for the builders. But apartment buildings are just cranking up. And to the degree that, we want a home ownership society, well, this graph is quite discouraging. We are producing more apartments, but not enough single family starts. The scale of the chart is a little different, but I'm just showing the direction. Directionally, the multifamily starts are, I think, the highest in 30 or 40 years, while the single family, as you can see, is retreating this year. Consumer confidence. How the consumers view about the economy. I think the consumers are saying we are in a recession. Again, the debate, are we in a recession or not? What the consumers are saying, they don't feel good about the economy. Consumer sentiment index, according to University of Michigan, is very, very low, multiple year low. And people get a daily reminder at the gas station and at the grocery store. Every single day, they're reminded things are not right. Here's another depressing survey. Survey by Fannie Mae. Simple question. Is it a good time to buy? And it is very low. But let's keep in mind, what people say and what people do not necessarily match up. Look at 2020. Do we see a boom in the people's response to say it's a good time to buy? No, we didn't see a boom, yet we know that home sales increase. Because if the timing is right or the mortgage rate is low, right property appears, people will take advantage. So right now, people are saying it's not a good time to buy. But if there's a right inventory, maybe they will step into the market. Or if there's a little dip in mortgage rate in some weeks, take advantage of those dips. But let me give you a little slightly different survey. This survey is from the New York Federal Reserve. And the question is a little different about home buying. So the question is not about, is it a good time to buy, but rather, is buying a home a good financial investment? Furthermore, they do something much more, I think, that is more complete, not partial, much more complete, which is they're asking a question about rents. What do you think is going to happen to rent? The second line. And people are saying, well, I think the rents will rise 6.6% a year. Florida markets is rising much faster. So once you pose the question about rents, people say, I don't want to pay higher rent, then another higher rent a year after. So once you embed into the people's mind about rent, not just about home buying, but you have to look at all the choices, and the choices are rents. And so once you put the question about rents and then ask the question, is that a good financial investment to buy a home? 73.6% say yes. Very few, 6% say no. So once the rent question is put in there, people are saying buying a home is a terrific financial investment. So my final slide to wrap it up, the forecast, what you can anticipate is the following on a nationwide basis. So these are the national figures. 2019, pre-COVID, nothing exciting. Home sales, no increase. Home prices rising 5%. 2020, first year of COVID. First half of the year, a lot of disruption, but second half, boom. So the total year was very positive. 2021, 12 months of positive activity led to 8.5% increase in unit sales, 16% increase in prices on a nationwide. You experienced higher price increases. But the forecast for 2022 is that first quarter was decent, second quarter not so, third quarter looks ugly, and fourth quarter looks ugly in terms of unit sales, down 20 or 30%. But nationwide, I think it's going to be down only about 13%, especially the Midwest, where things are very affordable. Like markets in Ohio, it's so cheap that changes in mortgage rate really do not impact their monthly payment. So I think the Midwest would be very insulated. So considering all this, I think the unit sale will only be down 13%, maybe more in the Naples, Marco Island, because you are more expensive market, but the prices will still be rising. And of course, your area actually may see bigger price increase once all the December numbers are in. So the dollar volume may be cut about 2%. Then by 2023, let's hope this recession is clearly out of the way. So job creation. I mean, we are actually creating jobs during current recession, but once we are out of the recession, we will continue to add more jobs. And Florida has been the leader in job creation, and therefore that would be the source to provide support for housing. For nationwide, I put 0% increase in unit sales. That's nationwide, but Florida will easily outperform the nation. So you are in a better position. So thank you for listening. Thank you for allowing me some time to share my ideas with you. And again, thank you very much.
And now, in my opinion, and I used to have a lot of them, to be funny about a serious topic, you've got to really know your topic. You've got to really know it. And our next speaker, I believe, is both. He's the former senior economist with the National Association of Home Builders in Washington. His research and opinions have been featured in many publications, and he is the regularly featured guest on talk radio and TV, and he authors a daily 70-word commentary on the economy. And maybe if we coax him, he'll tell us how to sign up for that. His presentation title is The Economy in 2022, Growing but Slowing. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Elliot Eisenberg, Dr. Elliot Eisenberg.
It's nice to be here. I am honored that you're all here. I already feel guilty because you bring me to a lovely city. I live in Miami, mind you, but it's beautiful on the West Coast. I tell everybody move to the West Coast. Nice hotel, great ambiance, great food. And now the news I'm going to give you is, so let's get on with it, right? Let's begin. So actually I changed the title of my talk to Take a Hike because the Fed's raising rates. They've already raised rates 4 times. and they're going to raise rates in 2 weeks, and then they're going to raise rates 6 weeks later, and then 6 weeks later again, as Lawrence mentioned. So let's begin and talk. But I want to begin by staking out a difference between me and Lawrence. I don't think we're in a recession, yet. We'll get there. Don't worry about it. But we're not quite there. We're there. We had these 2 crummy quarters just because of weird one-off reasons. Inventories bounced around, imports and exports bounced around. So you had government spending has plummeted because COVID's largely done. So all the stimulus checks stopped. If you add this up, you get really just weird one-off post-COVID returns to normalcy. And that's why you've had a couple bad quarters. But this is fundamentally a decent, I wouldn't say even decent, a fairly whatever economy. But we're creating tons of jobs. How can you have a jobful recession? It just doesn't make any sense. We're creating lots of jobs. There's labor productivity issues out there. Yeah, I get it. But no, we're not there yet. We'll get there. And I'll explain how we're going to get there and why, but we're not there yet. Let's begin by looking at GDP. GDP is all goods and services made in the US, right? Everything. And the first term is C, 69% of GDP. We'll spend a few minutes talking about that, like other stuff. The point here is GDP growth, because of C, 69% of GDP is starting to ebb a little bit. It's ebbing a little bit because the lower half of the population is beginning to run out of money. They saved a bunch during COVID, like we all did, but they're running out of it a little bit. They're now running down their savings. They're using credit cards and so on and so forth. So it's starting to slip a little. Nothing awful, but just signs of a little bit of cracking. We'll discuss more in detail why. The second term is I, corporate investments in plant and equipment and inventories. Inventories have largely recovered, not entirely, and autos still aren't there. I get it, but generally they've recovered. Right. So, and firms that are saying to themselves, oh, a recession is likely to come. Interest rates are going up. Now is not the time I want to invest in a new piece of equipment or build a new building from scratch right now. So that's going to put a bit of a damper. Nothing profound, but a bit of a damper. The third term is G, government spending. It has dropped like a friggin' rock. We have almost never, I have never seen this. I have to go back, look data further, maybe post-World War II demobilization or something. Maybe we had something as dramatic in fiscal contraction we have had now, but this is big. And the key thing is, if you add the fiscal contractionary policy that we're experiencing, I'll show you graphs on everything. Don't worry, trust me, there's lots of graphs. To tightening monetary policy, okay, that's already too much for the economy to withstand. On top of that, today, the Bank of England announced a 75 basis point hike, so 3/4 of a point hike in their interest rates. Canada yesterday raised their rates by 3/4 of a point. So you have now a global, tell them I'm busy, thank you. Maybe have our packet $1,000 contribution from this derelict phone. Just a thought, so everyone's raising rates. The Chinese and Japanese aside, everybody else is raising rates. So you've got global tightening, local, domestic, national tightening, contractionary fiscal policy as well, slowing income growth, it's declining. And we got a host of issues out there. The last term's exports minus imports. It's improved a lot lately because tourists are coming here and we're buying less PPP from China and they're buying more stuff from us and so on. But that's not a big story. Let's get into the details. So first is automobiles. Economists like to look at automobiles because automobiles they're not quite a house, but they give you an inkling of what a house is like. Because you don't buy a car every year. You always finance a car, right? So let's look at cars. The problem is cars now tell us absolutely friggin' nothing. If you look at the graph, there's a very light graph here, a gray bar, that's recession. So you come down, you get a recession. Down, there's a recession. Here there was also, that was the 2000.com that didn't hurt housing, it didn't hurt autos either. Here's the housing bust, it crushed the recession. This was a stupid cash for clunkers policy, whatever. I'm not bitter. My car didn't qualify, I'm not angry. This is COVID. Now in COVID, we didn't buy cars because we were all gonna die. There was no purpose, right? But then we get to here. So we should be there. That's where our car sales should be, somewhere around 17 million. But we don't make enough cars. We can't get computer chips and so on, inventory problems, supply chain crap. So there aren't enough cars. So who cares what the interest rate is on the car loan? Your car breaks, you got to get to work, you're buying a car. You may buy a used car, you may buy a smaller car, but you're freaking buying a car. So this is not telling us anything. So they say car sales are up, last month car sales are down, big deal. Ignore it entirely. This is now real retail sales. people look at that and say, well, that's a really important piece of it's a big data. I mean, you're buying buying a sofa, you're buying a refrigerator, you're buying a car potentially, washing machine, air conditioner, a Land Cruiser or something. Now, also utterly and completely meaningless. Every month they'll say, oh yeah, retail sales are down. Who cares? Now, why? The cars, we explained. The cars are because there's no chips, don't have enough cars, big shortage of cars, big demand exceeds supply, price of cars keeps going up. Okay, fine. This is different. Look at the trend. So here we are buying. And then it goes to hell. And it goes to hell really fast, right? Now, if you look at the prior recession, the housing bust, you may remember that, given what you do for a living. It went down from here to here. So it went down 20, right? Here it went down 40. So it went down twice as much. And it did it in about 20 minutes, right? So that's a problem. You have a violent decline, that's a problem. Now, exacerbating the problem, then 20 minutes later, it recovers. And then a day later, it skyrockets. So look at the trend. Buying. We would be there normally. Look where we are now. We're way up. Why? It's because I bought a Peloton for myself. I bought a Peloton for my daughter. I bought a Peloton for my ex-wife. I bought a Peloton for my girlfriend, for my mistress, my mother, whatever. It's on and on. Look, we're all Pelotons. I don't need any more Pelotons. Thank you very much. So now when they say, sales are flat, well, of course they're friggin' flat. I mean, what else do I need? I bought a couple of cars. I bought 4 computers. I bought 8 big screen television sets. I bought a pergola. I bought a Wolf Sub-Zero refrigerator for outside. I don't need anything, for God's sake. This has to stop. This has to either flatten or begin to drop a little bit, but we're still way above trend. Meaningless. This matters. This is important. This is total spending. This is at 69.5% of GDP. This is us buying stuff, not just stuff, but services. So I don't know about you, but what I want to do pretty much more than anything else in the whole world is go to an AC/DC concert and surf the mosh pit, cruise on with my 80,000 closest friends and scream my lungs out, right? That's what I want to do. Smoke some marijuana, have a good time. I didn't say that. Marijuana is illegal in Florida. Under no conditions I'm not condoning the behavior. I've never even done it. I've only read about it. Now we're going to come back to this in a few minutes. We'll come back to marijuana. But the point is, this is total spending. It really matters, right? And what you see here is, here's the trend like we had before. And the trend, okay, we have the big ditch. Yeah, of course. But ignore the ditch. I know that's silly, but just, here we're fine. And notice how here it's beginning to weaken a little bit. Now, I'm not ripping the ripcord. I'm not jumping out of a plane or cutting my wrists with box cutters here, okay? But I'm saying, this is making me a little uncomfortable. This is 69.5% of GDP. If it starts to wobble, this is telling me something not so great. And I'll explain to you why I think it's happening, which is more important. The manufacturing stuff we don't care about because we bought it all, the cars don't matter. This really matters because this is being pushed up already by services because we were underserviced, right? We didn't go to bars. We didn't go to ballet. We didn't go to a baseball game or basketball. We stayed home. We did friggin' nothing except buy junk from Amazon. And now we're done with the Amazon junk, but we want to go out. So even with the pent up demand for services, this is still not doing all that great. That's a bit of a problem. Under normal conditions, when you come out of a normal recession, what happens? You want to buy things. Because during the recession, you hold back on buying expensive ticket items. You buy cheap stuff. You buy services, maybe some clothes, but you don't buy cars. You don't buy boats. You don't buy houses. You don't buy Land Cruisers. This recession, completely the opposite. We've purchased our brains out of stuff. Now we want services. But how much pent-up demand for services can there be? I only can go out to eat 21 times a week, I cut my hair. I keep it short. I don't have much hair. Once a month, that's it, So this starts to crumble a little. I pay close attention. So I'm nervous a little bit. Now, why has it held up as well as it has, you could ask? And it's because of household balance sheets are very strong. Yeah, because what happened over the last couple of years? Up until January of this year, the stock market, the bond market, doing great. My Bitcoin, I had millions of dollars in Bitcoin, phenomenal. I had lots of GameStop, right? Bed Bath & Beyond, mem stocks. I was doing great there. Didn't have to work because I was getting paid not to work. Didn't have to pay my mortgage. Didn't have to pay my rent. Look, there are no bills, life is phenomenal, right? No rent, no mortgage, no student payments. I mean, this is good. and house prices kept going up. Now, this is Q1 through Q1. You can see it dips a little bit because the stock market in Q1 went down, but house prices kept going up in Q1. They kind of balanced each other out. Q2 data will come out. The market did worse in Q2. Home prices appreciated a little bit less in Q2. So it goes down a little more, but by and large, household balance sheets are good. We didn't go anywhere for so long. We built up a lot of savings. You were going to make some fancy trip to, I don't know, South America or South Africa or Australia or wherever it is, but you didn't go. And now you have all this money instead, right? So that's what's propped things up. It helped everybody. Except now, as I mentioned earlier, the lower quartile, the bottom 25%, they're beginning to run out of money. The next 25%, they're next to go, and they'll soon begin to run out of money as well. So a chunk of the population is now no better off than they were pre-COVID, and inflation's very bad. And it's sucking away income. As I'm not sure who it was it Brad or Lawrence? One of you guys mentioned income's declining. I'll show you some data on that too. You can see here, look, household savings. This is crazy. If you look before COVID, it was somewhere around 7% of disposable income was saved, right? That's after tax. This is after tax income. And then COVID hits and you see these big blip ups. So the first big blip up is the first stimmy check. The second stimmy check's kind of hidden there. That's the third stimmy check right there. So first, second stimmy, third stimmy, right? So savings goes up those months because you're getting, 600, 1,400, 1,500, whatever they were. But even without the stimmies, there was lots of savings going on. Look how high, even at its bottom, it was almost 13%, roughly double what it was pre-COVID. People were saving money. We were getting the stimmy checks. We kept our jobs. You guys were making money hand over fist, right? You're making what, 6% on every net profit on every single house. I mean, it's easy being a realtor, Okay, I'm kidding. Yeah, I know. I'm joking, but you get my point. You were doing well. You had this money. You weren't going anywhere, but now it's being driven down. This is not in and of itself a great sign. We're beginning to run down our savings because we don't have enough money because inflation's bad and our wages aren't keeping up with inflation. That's the story. Inflation not only is driving us crazy, but our wages aren't keeping up. We're getting 6% pay raises and inflation's 8%. We're worse off by 2%. This is not a recipe for a happy economy. There it is. Real per capita disposable income. You can see it's going nowhere. It's flat to down. This is not a great sign. Now, a meaningful part of this is because the fiscal stimulus is gone. If you ignore Washington, D.C. money, it's actually going up. But the fact is, you still spend the money, right? So this isn't great. And now job growth is going to slow because the Fed's raising rates to drive us into a weaker economy to reduce inflationary pressures. So job growth is weaker. Wages are already, per capita wages are declining. How do you have a booming economy when wages are declining? Really? We're burning through our savings a little bit. Incomes are falling. Inflation's bad. Fiscal policy is tight. Monetary policy is getting tighter. That's a lot of headwinds for our economy to face. Maybe we don't end up having a recession and we just miss it by the skin of our teeth type of thing. And we have very slow growth. Unemployment still goes up, but not a lot. That would be the best case scenario, right? I'm suspect. Now, Lawrence showed you this graph. It's a University of Michigan index about how happy we are, unhappy we are. I take it back 20 years. I think Lawrence took it back 2 or 3, whatever. But you can see it's pretty crummy. And it's crummy because inflation's bad and our incomes are declining. How many of you have opened a conversation with your friends, or maybe enemies for that matter, do you have any idea how much it cost me to buy that airplane ticket or a ticket to go see a rock band or something, some crazy amount of money? Inflation makes us all angry. We hate inflation. There's not much economic data out there telling us that inflation of 7 or 8% is so deadly. There's no evidence of it. That being said, it wrecks our minds. We hate it. It makes us angry. We want more money as a result to compensate for the inflation. And that begins to drive an inflationary spiral, which the Fed wants to stop. So this is being driven by inflation and declining incomes, maybe fear of COVID, I don't know, whatever other. There's also other angst out there. I mean, I'm not a sociologist, but last year, 107,000 Americans died of overdoses, right? Mostly fentanyl, but because that's laced, again, $1,000 for our part. Raise your hand, please. Don't be shy. Embarrass your friends. Shame them. Shame them. Yes, good for you. That man there, good for you. You're the man. Yeah, I see you're pointing to her. Yeah. letting your other fellow realtor, you're selling her down the river. Yeah, right. Now I'm selling you down the river. I even forgot where I was now. I don't know. I got so excited about our pack. But fentanyl, yeah, 107,000 people died of fentanyl. And then on top of that, we're killing each other on the roads. Driving miles have not recovered to where they were pre-COVID because we're still not all driving to work, but road deaths, they're up. So there's something in the soup here. I don't know what it is, but there's something here, right? But look, this is manufacturing. They were a lot happier a while ago, and they've consistently gotten, last month, it didn't decline much. Economists went, yes. So, this is not great. Consumer sentiment is not good. Manufacturing sentiment is not good because inputs cost more money. It's hard to get worker supply chains are improving, but it ain't great. And into this environment, you have very tight fiscal policy already, and you've got increasingly tightening monetary policy. The Fed doesn't really want to raise rates under these circumstances when fiscal policy is tight and consumer sentiment sucks. But they've got no choice because inflation's so bad, because arguably they're a little too late to the inflationary game here. They missed the boat. The boat took off last fall. They weren't there, and now things are worse. They're catching up, whatever. This is manufacturing, so it's not great. Then there's services. Okay, it's not bad. It's kind of normal. This is good. Services are good. There's pent-up demand for services. Restaurants are busy. Hotels are busy. We can't get workers, but at least the owners aren't unhappy here, right? The purchasing managers aren't unhappy. So households aren't happy. Manufacturers are getting increasingly unhappy and on the verge of being unhappy. 50 is neutral, by the way. Services are okay. Then there's small business. That would be you. Look at that number. That's friggin' sucky. I think I'll give you some instances. For instances, this is a good sign. This is a good number. This is when Mr. Trump became suddenly President-elect Trump, and you went, oh, a tax cut's on the way. And it came. You were very happy. Then this is COVID coming. Woo, very bad, 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 bad. This decline from there to there is not trivial. It took longer to happen. These are very sudden declines and a very sudden rise, but this is a substantial decline. Now, part of it's because small businesses are often households too. The same person heads a household, ends a small business, and the stock market's down. So this is picking up that, and inflation's bad. So there's correlation between these indicators. I get it, but households aren't happy, small businesses aren't happy, manufacturers on the verge of not being happy, right? Oh, I don't have it here. CEO sentiment, we'll come back. CEO sentiment is also not good. They're unhappy. When they interview CEOs say, yeah, my business is okay, but I'm preparing for the future recession when I know things are going to get worse and other businesses aren't doing well, right? So it's either narcissism that they misunderstand their own skill set, or they're wearing rose-colored glasses, or things are going to get worse. I'm not sure which, but we could argue. But small business is not happy. CEOs aren't happy. Manufacturers. This is not an environment in which you want to tighten fiscal policy. It really is not. Usually you want to increase interest rates when the economy is roaring, right? And things are great. And they can maybe withstand some, but now we're already seeing creaks and cracks and so on and so forth. And why is this? It's all because of COVID. And the COVID numbers now are pretty good. This is the number of deaths per day. We used to look at caseloads a day, right? But caseloads don't tell us anything anymore because now we do a lot of at-home testing. So for example, I take a test, I find out I have COVID. The first thing I do is call my mother-in-law. Honey, can we get together? It'd be so nice to give you a hug. I love you very much. I would never do that. I'm only divorced. Doesn't really matter. But you get the point, right? So this is better. COVID's better. And you can see like us, we're here, we're living with COVID. Yeah, whatever. The problem is to some extent, China hasn't decided to live with COVID yet. China still has this insanely stupid zero COVID tolerance policy. They just shut down a city called Chengdu. You probably never heard of it. It's the capital, I think, Sichuan province, where all the good food comes from, by the way. 21 million people. That's like closing down New York and like Los Angeles at the same time. Because, 4 people or 14 or 44 have COVID, or it's a very small number, right? People don't want to go anywhere in China because they're afraid. They go to like an amusement park and someone gets COVID, they'll close the amusement park with you inside, the same person again. That's double, man. That is trouble. You got to take some fentanyl now. Yeah, okay. So COVID's kind of going away, but it's still there and it could rear its ugly head. It doesn't seem that way. We've all either had COVID once or twice, had 2, 3, 4, 26 shots. I don't know, whatever it is. So it's better. So this is kind of going away, right? And there's other good news here. So we talked about consumer sentiment, not good, spending, not good. Like Brad, there's good news too. This is inventories. I want you to look at the bottom color, the one on the very far right on the bottom, retail sales to inventory. This is you walk into a store, you want to buy a pair of shoes, you want to get a shirt, you want to buy a dress or something, right? And they don't have it, and you get angry, and that makes consumer sentiment nosedive. But it's much better now. It's gone from 1.1, which is low. Historically, it's been between 1.4 and 1.5, and now it hit bottom at 1.1, and now it's going straight up. And if you exclude cars, it's almost back to normal. Cars are really doing a number because you just can't get these chips. Now, in a year and a half, we're going to be awash in chips because everybody's building fabs. These fabs cost $10 billion. They take a couple of years to build. The government here in the US is now subsidizing. The French, the Europeans are, the Australians are, the Koreans are, the Taiwanese. We'll be awash in chips. But right now, we're still a shortage. But other than that, this is pretty good news. So if you like shopping at like TJ Maxx, or like what Wednesday morning or Thursday morning at one of those shows, one of those stores, they're going to have apparel like you haven't seen, bargains galore. So this is getting better. So supply chains are improving. You can see it here. Supply chains are improving. Trouble with trucking, couldn't get truckers, couldn't get chassis. Problems not recovered back to normal, but it's getting there. Before COVID, it was in the 45 to 50 range. 50 is ordinary. So it's still elevated, but coming way down. So trucking is getting better. Here's another index put up by Oxford Economics. It shows supply chains were peaked out where they're worst sometime back in March somewhere, and slowly have gotten better. I can show you others by the Fed banks, various Fed banks, other places. Prices paid coming down, delivery times coming down, receiving inputs for manufacturing coming down. Everything's normalizing. It hasn't gotten there. It's not perfect. Some places better than others, but I think goods inflation is a problem that goes away. Our demand for stuff has come down because we bought all the Pelotons we need. The supply chains have gotten fixed, right? So it's like there's less demand and there's more supply. So this is used car prices are now starting to meaningfully decline already. Today I saw the Manheim index. It's coming down, still way elevated, but it's way down from its peak back in March or April, right? Because a little bit more cars or a few more cars are available, right? The supply chains are better. Oil prices are meaningfully down. That's helpful. How long this stays, no one knows. This is a complete unknown. I can tell you a story that says China stays weak because of their policies. Their real estate sectors in the garbage can, education sectors in the trash can, high tech's in the trash can. They got COVID lockdowns everywhere. The mental health there is really declining because people are nervous. So but then on the other hand, maybe they change their policy. They give up on zero COVID. They let everybody get infected and they get on with life. And then the demand for oil skyrockets, prices go way up, and that hurts our economy and causes more inflation. And maybe the frackers produce more, and maybe the Europeans, Norwegians produce more. Maybe they don't. No one has any clue. Right now, it's down. That's a good thing. Supply chains are better. Raw material costs are coming down. So I think goods inflation goes down. I think raw materials go down. I think food inflation also is no longer a problem. What is a problem, and what I'm most concerned about, and I'll show you slides on this later, is wages and rents. And I think Lawrence talked about rents in this conversation. We'll get into more detail on that. But this is a good piece of news. And look at friggin' corporate profits. They're friggin' amazing. What does this mean? This means we are eager to buy stuff, and firms are able to pass their cost on to us. Whatever cost they're getting, they just pass it on because otherwise you'd see a decline in corporate profit. No, foof. I mean, here it was good. This is right before COVID, right around $2 trillion. Now it's closer to $3 trillion. A 50% friggin' rise. This is the highest percent of GDP ever. 12% of GDP is corporate profits now. This is 12, 13. This is huge. I don't think this persists. The stock market has done well because of this, because corporate earnings have been good, because firms have been able to pass their costs on. Now with incomes flattening and people being less happy and maybe going into recession, people rethink these sorts of things. So I'm not sure it persists, but for now, wow, corporations have pricing power because we want stuff. I went to a conference. I was in some fancy hotel. I asked, what would the rate be if it weren't for the conference I spoke at? And the person literally said to me, $1,100 a day. And I went, I used some bad words. I can't say them publicly now, but I went, no, F, but it's like, whoa. How can that be? Who on earth would pay that money? Go to Europe, for God's sake. It ain't that good. The hotel is nice. It ain't that good. So we've talked about households not feeling great. We've talked about businesses not being really excited about the world. Service providers happier, goods not so happy, right? Let's talk about fiscal policy. Because fiscal policy is now profoundly contractionary. Let's go back and look at this graph. On the left, the first hill, the first above the line hill is the dot-com bust of 2000. I remember the dot-com bust because I was getting divorced. At the time, President W was president, and he gave out stimmy checks. I didn't get one. My ex-wife got it. I'm not bitter. I'm just telling you, not bitter. So we got stimmy checks, and then we had the inevitable recovery hangover, where we become a little bit more fiscally responsible. We pull back the stimmy checks. There's a little bit of contractionary fiscal policy. Right there's the contractionary fiscal policy. Then some years later comes the housing bust in the middle, right? And who was president? Obama was president, and he passes the ARRA. That was the big deal. The shovel-ready projects, infrastructure, they turned out not to be shovel-ready, but that's not his fault, right? He tried, right? There's $1 trillion, of course, is through the economy. It helps the economy. It's a boost to the economy. And then that money slowly goes away, and we have a contractionary fiscal policy. This doesn't cause a recession, and this doesn't cause a recession either. Then comes COVID. That's the tall blue bars near the very far right of the graph. And they're very big. They're huge. They're over 4% of GDP. That's 3. This is closer to 4% of GDP, right? I mean, these are really big numbers. And then it's over. And what happens next is we have the inevitable hangover. But look at the magnitude of the friggin' hangover. It's negative 3%. We've gone from +4 to -3. That's friggin' 7 percentage points of GDP being that sucking sound that H. Ross Perot talked about in 1992. It's not jobs going to Mexico. It's fiscal policy being drained and the bathtub going down. So we've got massive fiscal policy, contractionary fiscal policy that we haven't seen maybe since World War II, maybe Korean demobilization. I'm not sure. I haven't looked that far back. And now we've got really quickly tightening monetary policy. I think that's too much for our economy to withstand. With wages that are at best flat to declining, this is a big ask for our economy. So I'm a little nervous. Now, getting back to, are we in a recession or not? The answer is no, we're not. This graph takes out all the bouncy parts of GDP. Net exports, goodbye, right? Inventories, goodbye. Government spending, out. And what you end up with is this very long name thing. Final sales to private domestic purchasers, right? And it's real. So it's inflation adjusted because inflation is really bad now. So you've always got to think about inflation. Look at the damn number. It's friggin' pleasantly positive. I mean, it's not super high, but it's roughly in line with where it's been. This is not a recession. This is just 2 fluky bad quarters. And we're likely to have more of these fluky bad quarters going forward because GDP 20 years ago used to grow at 3.25%. Now it's down to 2 because of population growth and labor productivity growth, which are all sucky, whole different conversation. But as GDP weakens, and now we're at this new normal of 2%, when it's 2%, the chance of having a crummy quarter because of imports or exports or trade or inventories or government spending or whatever go up or down is not that small. The slower the GDP is, the easier it is to get into a negative quarter. So we're likely to experience like this more going forward than we have in the past. Doesn't mean we have a recession, but we'll get there. And now I say, why do I see the recession? Because of this. I've already told you about the spending not doing well, and consumers not being happy, and small business not being happy, and manufacturers not being happy. Let's now talk about the yield curve. The yield curve looks like this. This is the yield curve. The yield curve on the bottom axis is time, 1 year, 5, 10, 20, 30 years. On this axis, the y-axis, it's interest rates, 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%. Think about a home mortgage. You guys know something about home mortgages, I think. Your buyer wants to buy a house, you tell them, they're getting a mortgage. Well, how much a 30-year mortgage? Well, it's 6%, you tell them. They go, whoa, that's too much money. I can't afford it. You go, well, let's get you a 20-year mortgage. Payments are higher, but the rate's only 5. I'm making this up, right? Hey, I'll ask to maybe Brad says, maybe you get a 5-1 mortgage. I think we talked about a 5-1 mortgage, Brad. What's that going at now? 4? Because the less time you borrow for, the less you pay. Because the lender's taking less risk. There's interest rate risk, there's credit risk, there's default risk, there's death risk. It goes on, right? 30 years, long time, betting on you to survive for 30 years here, you know? So you borrow less, you pay less. So you come in here, 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, the longer you borrow for, the more you pay. Okay, now, sometimes the yield curve goes And that's like crazy. When short-term money is more expensive than long-term money. That's like ridiculous. The first time I heard this, I thought my teacher in college was on pot. I was confused. Where he's taking psychedelics or psilocybin or, not that I know what these things are, but just I read about it again. To make a long story short, the yield curve normally upward sloping. The longer you borrow, the more you pay. But sometimes the Fed begins like now into a rate rising cycle. So this end, the short end of the yield curve starts to go up. Okay, the long end goes up with it because at first the economy is pretty strong. We're doing okay. We got to tamp things down. Okay, fine. But then the Fed begins to raise the short-term rate a lot. And then the market goes, I'm nervous. I think we're going to get into a recession. And as that recession concern becomes reality, the long end of the yield curve starts to go down. And that's what's happening now. The Fed's going to push up the short end so much. The long end isn't going to keep up. It's going to drop a little bit. And right now, the short end's at 3.3, 3.25, 3.3. The long end's at 3, right? 25, 30 basis points, a third of a percentage point differential. Okay, so you go, okay, Elliot, that's really entertaining. Why do we care? This is why we care. This graph, the bar shows a flat yield curve. Whenever the yield curve is positively sloped, the blue squiggle is below the line. That's happiness. But whenever the yield curve goes, whoa, bad. It wasn't the same person again. It's somewhere else. I saw that. That's your first one. The other person had 2. You get a second one. But every time the yield curve inverts, the blue squiggle goes above the red bar. Okay. And every single time it's happened, with the exception of 1966, if you look carefully, you see a gray bar here, a gray bar, 2 gray bars, an inversion, a gray bar, an inversion, a gray bar, an inversion, a gray bar, an inversion, a gray bar. And now we have an inversion. This is a perfect predictor. It's not causing the recession. This is like a thermometer. You walk into the doctor's office, they throw the old days, a thermometer in your face. Oh my God, you've got a temperature of 117. You must be really sick. That's amazing you're still alive, but whatever, this is telling you, you got some monetary policy issues that have to be resolved here. You got issues here. Wow, this is not a Florida welcome. I'm going back to Miami, man, where they like me. My neighbors like me. No one calling. No. So this is making me nervous. This is making me nervous, right? Consumer sentiment's not good. Small sentiment, services of business is not good. CEOs aren't happy. The yield curve is inverted. Fiscal policy is tight, as is monetary policy. So why am I so sure? We have the yield curve, but now let's look at interest rate movements. This is the history of interest rate movements of the Fed funds rate, the rate they control, and the rate that in 2 weeks, they're going to jack up by 75 basis points or 3/4 of a point. So the blue line is the Fed funds, right? And these are all recession bars. They raise rates, you get a recession. You raise rates, you get a recession. You raise rates, a recession. You raise rates, a recession. You raise rates, a recession. But some of you are going to point out, hey, Elliot, whoa, there's that, this, and that. That's 64, 84, and 94. So I called up Jay Powell. I made this observation. I said, Jay, wait 2 more years to raise interest rates. In 2024, we should be fine, right? He said, thanks very much, Elliot. So let me put this into language you understand. Let me give you an example. You come to me, you're a patient. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I'm making this up. You have a little limp. Nothing bad, but a little limp. And you like me to get rid of the limp. So I talk to you. I say, yeah, I guarantee you 100% success. You're not going to limp when you walk off the table. Now, based on history here, I've done 13 of these procedures before. 10 times the client died. That's called a recession. But 3 times they survive. So when they survive, they get up and they have no limp. And when you're dead, you also have no limp. No limp. I'm not lying. Now, tell me, you have a 3 in 13 chance of living. I think you're gonna limp the rest of your life. Yes. Yeah, right. Exactly. So the Fed is now doing something that they're not really good at doing. It's not that they're stupid people. It's that they don't friggin' know the future any better than you do. They have no idea what's coming on. Powell talks every couple of weeks. He spoke today at the Cato Institute. In 2 weeks, he'll go to Congress. He gives press conferences. Everyone, waits on every word he says. The stock market bounces, interest rates move. No one knows jack. So someone else did some cute research. The Fed, the board of the members of the FOMC who change interest rates, who meet every 6 weeks, they give us, in 2 weeks when they meet, they're going to give us their predictions of the Fed funds rate 12 months ahead. That's part of what they do. They tell us this to give us insight into what they're thinking and kind of stuff like that. So someone took all this data and said, how accurate are they? This is the rate they control. We're asking you to predict the rate that you control. 34%. That's what they get. They're right 34% of the time. I mean, a coin would do better. And then when they asked about, oh, give us GDP, unemployment, or inflation, it ranges between 34 and 19. The Fed knows nothing. Powell just trash talks. It's just yo, we're data dependent. Of course we're friggin' data dependent. I married my ex-wife that was data dependent. I just looked at the wrong friggin' data. I mean, I think I'm a smart guy, but you just make mistakes because no one knows the future. He doesn't know the future either. So he makes stuff up. He says, yeah, we're this, yeah, we're flexible, no, we're rigid, yeah, whatever. He just makes this garbage up. Ignore what he says. The problem is markets pay attention. That's the problem, right? Now, when will the recession hit? So this data shows you, look at the bottom corner, it shows you roughly 2 years from the date of the first rate hike. The first rate hike occurred in March. So normally, think March of 2024, we get a recession. That's 2 years after the first rate hike. No, I think it comes much earlier than this because the Fed's raising rates really fast. They're raising rates 3/4 of a point 2 meetings ago, last meeting, now this meeting, then 50 basis points the next meeting, and 50 points 3 meetings ago. I mean, this is a huge amount. They raised rates by 300 basis points in like 6 months. That's crazy. So the normal time they raise rates 1/4 point every meeting or something. They take their friggin' time, they party a little bit and have a margarita. Now they're on a speedboat to a recession. So the question you might ask me is, how come it normally takes 2 years? Even a year is a pretty long time. I'm predicting a recession like in April or something. Why does it take so long? Okay, let me give you an analogy. I don't know if any of you have ever had the experience of eating some like a brownie or a gummy bear that's laced with THC. I don't know. I know I never have, but I read about it. And you read the paper, people tell you their experiences. So I'll tell you an experience that a friend of mine had. So they took a gummy bear, 10 minutes later, nothing. So second gummy bear, nothing. That person thinks that they're very strong, that they can withstand the onslaught of THC that's coursing through their body. They have a third gummy bear. And then about 10 minutes later, the freight train hits down. The world is spinning, they're on the sofa, and they're out for 24 hours. Again, it's illegal in Florida. Do not consume marijuana. We're somewhere now in the monetary policy world about to consume our second gummy bear. We're still feeling fine. We're thinking this time is different. Yeah, interest rates don't matter. What do you mean interest rates don't friggin' matter? They friggin' matter. Buildings stopped being built, right? IPOs stop happening. SPAC deals, they've all gone reverse now. Junk bond yields, difference between them and treasuries is widening. Financial conditions haven't tightened wildly, let me tell you, but they're beginning to tighten a little bit. And that's what the Fed wants. Housing's already in a recession to some extent, right? New construction, certainly, right? So you're starting to see the effects. Rates are going to get higher, and the lagged effect of the THC is going to hit us sometime in the spring. And then it's too late. Then they'll want to maybe lower rates, but they won't. They won't, because they want to squeeze inflation out of the system, right? So they're going to say, no, we're going to keep rates. Lawrence talked, as he said, maybe they'll lower rates end of the year. Yeah, that's entirely possible. But I mean, that's a long time away. That's like 15, 16 months. They're going to keep raising rates through December, January, and then keep them flat through the end of the year or November or something, whatever. That's a long time of high rates. Something's going to give. Our economy will weaken. Now, how long will the recession last? I don't think it lasts that long. If you look at this graph, this goes all the way back to pre-Civil War, all the recessions the US have had. Just right of center is one that says 41 months or 43 months. That's the Great Depression. So it's almost 4 years of recession, right? In a row. Since then, we haven't had a lot of long recessions. We had a 16-monther, a 16-monther, and an 18-monther. Let's take them in reverse order. The 18-monther was the housing bust. What made the housing bust special was that real asset prices had to come down. There was a massive housing bubble. Credit conditions, appraisers, everybody was involved, the securitizers. No one was at fault, arguably, but credit condition, my cat got a mortgage, there were some problems out there. So when real prices have to come down on physical assets, you got a problem. Similarly, the first 16-monther back in 75, that was the oil embargo, the OPEC oil embargo that began in 73 or 74 after the war, the Yom Kippur War in Israel, right? So we had real asset prices had to come down because oil prices quadrupled from $3 a barrel to 12. So factories that were profitable at $3 a barrel oil suddenly become very unprofitable really fast at 12 bucks, and you had to wait in line to get gas, right? So that was a weird one-off problem. The one in the middle is Paul Volcker raising interest rates when inflation had gotten out of hand throughout most of the 60s and all of the 70s. You go, whoa, that's kind of similar today. And I go, no, it's not. That was 20 years of really bad monetary policy and 20 years of really bad, almost 20 years of bad fiscal policy. We had the war on poverty going on and the Vietnam War, and our economy was being demanded more from our economy than it could produce, generating inflation. And the central bank didn't do much about it. The central bank said, yeah, whatever. They tried to do some things, I give them credit, but the three central bankers at that time, William McChesney Martin, Bill Miller, and Arthur Burns, were all idiots. Nice guys, smart people, but they were just dumbasses, right? They were. Moreover, the presidents that they worked under, mostly LBJ and Nixon, Ford and Carter were not violent towards their central bankers, but Nixon and LBJ beat them hard. And there's one instance I remember reading about it. It said LBJ cornered the central banker, took his index finger and hit him on his shoulder blade and screamed at him, apparently, boys are dying in Vietnam and you don't care. Okay, if LBJ, the president who's towering over me, screaming at me, saying lower rates, I'll say, okay, Mr. President, I'll lower rates, right? But now the central bank has independence. Congress has given it. They can take it away. They're Congress, but they have some independence. And Powell was late to the game. Yeah, sure. But he ain't 17 years late. He's 7 months late. And he's telling us now hard he's going to raise rates to change our expectations of the future so that we don't expect inflation to be bad a year or 2 years out. So he's making up for lost time. The price that may well be a recession as a result, because he wants to get the economy, inflation down. And that he said, that's my number one concern. We're not going to rest until we do it. It may come back. We have to be fervent and determined. We can't let up too quickly. I mean, he's given us all the smoke signals that he is going to drive us into recession if that's what it takes to get inflation under control. And that's the right call, because the longer it takes, like it did in the 60s and 70s, the longer it persists, the longer it stays, the more it gets embedded in our minds, then we begin to want pay raises. And then that causes a vicious cycle because the cost of good goes up because we get paid more money. And then the cost of good goes up more because inflation goes up. We want more money and there's more inflation. The Fed doesn't want it. Let's talk about labor markets. Labor markets are both way better than you thought and way worse than you thought at the same time. First, the data. I think Brad showed this data. This is pre-COVID. This is post-COVID. Employment today is several 100,000 more than it was pre-COVID nationally. In Florida, almost back to trend growth, Brad, from what you showed us. But nationally, we've caught up. The trend, of course, would be somewhere up there if you continued that line. We're way behind, but we've caught up. This is very good. Let me explain. On the far left, the first hill is the dot-com boom, then the dot-com bust. We lose 4 million jobs, or 3 million jobs, peak to trough. Takes us 4 years to get the jobs back. 4 years to get back 3 million jobs. In the middle of the graph is the housing bust. We lose 8 million jobs, peak to trough. Takes us 6 years to get these jobs back. Now we lost 22.5 million jobs. That's crazy. And yet in 2 years and 5 months, we got all the jobs back. Lightning fast. It's like the workers are coming back in droves. I mean, droves. They're not coming back fast. They're coming back super fast. So what the hell's the problem? The problem is demand came back much faster because we had to save money, the stimmy checks, don't pay your rent, don't pay your mortgage, Bitcoin doing well, the stock market, the bond market, everything's roaring. We had tons of money. We're at home. We had nothing to do. Let's buy our brains out. So demand, supply comes back really quick, but the workers aren't coming back fast enough. That gap is a supply chain problem. Here, Europe, everywhere. That's the problem. So the workers are coming back, but the demand came back even more quickly, causing problems. Who could have predicted this? This is the issue. Had I seen this, I would have been a genius. I didn't see it. So unemployment as a result has plummeted. It's back to where it was. Just before COVID, which is right there, that's just before COVID, right there is before COVID, it was 3.5%. That was the lowest level it had been since the late 60s, right there. So between there and there, it had never been that low. So here we enter COVID at 3.5%, the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years since we were sending our kids off to Vietnam and so on and so forth, right? So now it's 3.7, it's up a bit, but it's still very, very low, very, very low. It's too low. It has to go up. We need it to go up because we need wage pressures to come down. With so few workers, right now there are 2 open jobs for every unemployed American. There are 5.5 unemployed Americans. There are 11 million open jobs. We've never experienced this before. Like 6 months ago we did, but never, until now. There's just crazy demand for workers out there. Hotels are hiring people. People want workers. They don't want to let go of their workers. They're afraid they can't get new ones. We better hire what we can get, hoard them or something, right? So there's huge demand for workers. But the problem is this problem too. The labor force participation rate's gone down. People have friggin' quit. There's something now different about the world. People just don't want to work like they did for some reason, right? People have changed what they want. They've had a near-death experience. Their mother, their father, their sister, their brother has died. Someone they know has died or gotten very sick or almost died, or they know this virus out that could kill them, and they go, I want out for God's sake. So I talked to the person here in the hotel. She was moving the cart, with the towels and the lotions and sheets and stuff. I said, how's it going? She said, hey, it's good you asked me. I'm changing jobs tomorrow. I said, no kidding. She said, yeah. Tomorrow morning, I'm starting as a co-pilot for Delta. She said to me, I can drive the truck well. So when the plane's on the ground, I can drive it. So the pilot's going to drive in the air. I'm going to drive on the ground. And they said they're so desperate for co-pilots. They said, sure. So now, people want more out of life. They want a better job, whatever it is, right? So look, and other reasons are people quit. People quit. You were a manicurist. So during COVID, the worst of COVID, every hour, 20 minutes, someone comes, gives you your hand, and they breathe all over you. And they're going to kill you. And you have grandkids. You hate your husband, but you love your grandkids. You hate your kids, but you love your grandkids. And you want to kiss them more, so you quit. So people quit. That's 1. 2, there's no freaking teachers. When there's no teachers, someone's got to stay home with the kid. The kid doesn't get educated. This turns out to cost the kid lifetime income, 6, 7, 8% of lifetime income because of essentially the year they lost during the 2 years of the craziness of COVID and the masks and the learning at home or not learning at home, whatever. So the kid's not getting educated. The employer doesn't have the employee. The household doesn't have the money, and the parent doesn't have a career, right? Now, who stays home, mommy or daddy? Turns out to be almost always mommy. Mommies love their kids way more than the daddies do. Honey, I love the kids. Bye. Wreck your career. Thanks. Taking it for the team. Thank you. This is the problem. This is the problem. And then he's okay, maybe there are daycares. But no, there are no friggin' daycares either. So you can't drop the kid off anywhere. So this poor person staying friggin' home, playing hide and seek for 7 hours with a 3-year-old. As fun as it is, it ain't fun. Let me tell you. Then there's plain old death. Since COVID began, since the 27 months since COVID began, look at the number of Americans who died. Compare that number to the number of Americans who died in the 27 months before COVID. Now, I'm going to make a vast generalization and insult both Democrats and Republicans at the same time here. The Democrats are going to say they died all of COVID because they didn't wear the mask. That's not true. The Republicans are all going to say there is no COVID. They died because of heart attacks and cancers that weren't detected because the hospitals were full of that stupid crap. It's not, I'm making exact on both sides. The point is, it doesn't matter what your opinion is. The fact is, they're dead and they're not going back to work. All right? So Now, all of them aren't workers. Some of them are retired people, but a quarter of them work because they're young enough to work, right? So you lose a couple 100,000 there. You lose a couple million because of the teachers. You lose 1 million because they just won't go back as long as COVID's around. There are 3 million equivalent, full-time equivalent workers who aren't working because they have long COVID bad enough they can't work. You got 3 million Americans who are taking care of people who have COVID or long COVID. You add it up, million here, 2 million here, 3 million here. Holy cow, that's a lot of people. That's why our labor force is tighter. That's why we don't have enough workers. We need to get more workers for God's sake. Then there's just people being sick. This is the worst of Omicron. Almost 4 million people weren't working that month, right? And there are 4 million more taking care of them. And what were they all doing? They were on their damn phone, buying crap on Amazon, making supply chain problems worse. I'm not kidding, right? So you got all these weird problems, people not working, supply chains breaking down, the sickness exacerbating supply chains, worsening inflation. Oh, man. And then you have immigration problems. Now we have an illegal immigration problem. I understand, right? Now it's an alarm. Wow, I get no respite here. I'm just leaving now. Yeah. So this is immigration. If we had the policies that we had through the Obama administration, now through Trump and almost the first half of Biden, we'd have 2.5 million more legal immigrants in the country. But President Trump made it harder for immigration to come, political stuff, I get it. And Biden said, oh, that's a bad policy. Let's continue it. Now, I hate them both for very different reasons. So what was the first thing that Trump did? Got us out of TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, a really, really, really bad idea. And we're now at a competitive disadvantage to so many other countries in trade. But Biden thought, it's got to be something I can do that's equally stupid. I'm going to think of something. And let's kill the XL pipeline. We don't need energy. That's old-fashioned crap. Done. Come on. No, now we have to grovel and go to Saudi Arabia and beg Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, to make more oil. The Canadians would gladly. They took out an ad in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. Canadian oil is friendly oil. That was their slogan. No pipeline, no oil. So what do people do? There's no jobs and demand is strong. They make their own business. No rent to pay, no mortgage to pay, no student loans to pay. Unemployment checks or child tax credits. It doesn't get much better than this. So you open your business and you're all Uber drivers, right? Maybe they'll work out down the road, but they're not working out right now just yet. So you end up with a graph like this. This is a crazy graph. Look at the blue on the left-hand side. The blue is the percentage of the labor force that quits their job every month. So on the far left in blue, this is the dot-com boom. 2.4% of the labor force quit their job every month at the peak of the dot-com boom. The next big boom was the housing boom, left of center. 2.2% of the population quit their job every month. Okay, you with me? Now on the far right, not far right, the near far right, right there, that's before the COVID lockdown, 2.4% of the population quit their job. So when the economy's roaring and unemployment's low and things are good, and we're channeling our inner Johnny Paycheck, take this job and shove it, 2.2, 2.4, quit their job. But now it's 2.7. It was as high as 3. If I didn't know what was going on, I would think the unemployment rate was well below 3%. Something has changed. There is no doubt. Will they come back? I don't know. We'll see. But right now, and as a result of that, look at this graph. Look at this graph. This graph says if you're a loser down here in this color gold, and you keep your job, 6% pay raise. But if you have inner drive and intestinal fortitude and tell your boss to shove it, you get 8.5. So we're all quitting jobs. It's like friggin' musical chairs. We're all quitting jobs, getting more money, raising inflation, making the economy worse, making the Fed have to raise rates higher. So do we have inflation? You friggin' better believe we have inflation. Yeah, hello, there is inflation. So now the Fed's got trouble. Labor markets are the big thing. Labor markets are killing us. Wage inflation is too big and rent inflation is too big. Rent inflation 6, 7%. Wage inflation 6, 7, 8%. This is well above the Fed's desire of 2% inflation. They have to cool the economy down meaningfully. Even if energy inflation and goods inflation and food inflation goes away, you've got real estate rental inflation is like 30% of CPI or 40% of CPI. So here's it's CPI regular, and that's without food and energy. Economists like to look at without food and energy because food and energy, as you know, bounce around because of wars, Europe, right? And weather, right? Scorching hot or cold or low water or whatever. So you look at the red. The red's coming down. Good news, good news, good news. But wait, I'm now going to replace the red line. The blue line stays the same, but the red line is now no longer core CPI, but service CPI. Whoa, hello. Houston, we got a problem. Inflation, if you look at median inflation, what's generally going on? It continues to rise. Inflation's going down now because food inflation is going down, energy inflation is going down, but not general economy-wide inflation. If this inflation persists and rent inflation continues to rise, or even stay at 7%, we got a problem on our hands. So the Fed's going to raise rates. And this is where the rubber hits the road. So right now, the Fed rate is 2 3/8. They're going to raise it at least half a point, probably they're telegraphing 3/4 of a point. They're going to have 2 more meetings by the end of the year. If they raise half a point now and then a quarter, we end up there. But if they end up raising 3/4 of a point and then half a point, we end up at this level at December 31st. And they're talking about raising rates beyond that. It all depends on inflation. As Lauren said, no one knows what's going to happen. If inflation comes down quickly, like next couple of months, like an anvil being pushed off a cliff, no recession. Fed stops, rates come down. Hallelujah. The war in Europe ends. China ends its zero COVID tolerance policy. Yeah, miracles happen, right? This could happen. All gone. But under normal circumstance, I think inflation falls too slowly. The Fed keeps raising rates. They drive us into recession. That's what I think happens sometime next year. Now, this is evidence of rental inflation. That's friggin' nuts. That's untenable. You have to lose enough jobs so the demand for housing goes down so that this is pushed down. And that means unemployment's got to rise from 3.5% to 5.5%. It's just got to, right? Here's shelter. This is just what? This is owner equivalent rent. So what your house would rent for if you rented your house. And here's one more. Primary residence, so not including vacation homes. No matter how you measure rent, it's going way up. So quickly, we'll look at a couple slides locally and we'll wrap it up. This is what CoreLogic says is going to happen to home prices. Look, CoreLogic's smart, but they don't know anything either because no one knows the future. If they did, they wouldn't work. If Brad knew the future, he wouldn't work either. If Lawrence knew, he also wouldn't work. But they're saying it looks pretty good in Florida because immigration from north is good. Higher income people are moving here. Taxes are low. Weather's nice. House prices are cheap. It's a pretty good. Texas for the same reason. It's a very good story. They have the same thing. Low income taxes, decent weather. Houston sucks, but whatever. I'm not going to go on. Then there's future growth. Where are people moving? They're moving south and west. They're moving to Texas, the Intermountain West, like Idaho, Nevada, Utah, right? Texas, and the north in the east of the Mississippi River. It's the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee. Those are the better states. Last 10 years. Last year or two, same thing. Intermountain West, Texas, Montana, no one lives there, as Lawrence talked about. And then the South, those are the better states, right? And then in terms of moving, where are people moving to? This is 2019, Florida's 7th in the country. People are moving here. 2020, 9th in the country. 2021, 9th in the country. Florida had a 1.1% population growth last year. That's 10 times the US average of 1/10. Because people are moving here, there's population growth. It's a dynamic, growing state. This will buoy up home prices because you're not building enough home prices, both Brad and Lawrence talked about earlier. So, and then my last comment is the overall economy is weakening. I don't think we're in a recession. Lawrence does. It doesn't really matter. We've had crummy growth. We had negative growth for 2 quarters. Over the course of this whole year, it'll end up being about 0 because 3 and 4 will be better, but nothing remarkable, right? And next year, I'm more concerned about. This is March. Darker colors are better. That's July. It's a lot weaker because the economy is weakening because rates are going up. So if you put it together, 22 will have 0 growth at the end. 2 quarters are bad, 2 quarters that are better. The Fed's going to keep raising rates. How much they raise depends on inflation. What happens to inflation? I wish I knew. The Fed's going to create another 1 million jobs before the year's up. We've already done 2.5. Inflation's peaked in July. It's how fast it falls is all that matters. No one knows. Spending on services will rise. We're done buying stuff. Ignore cars, ignore retail sales. Look at overall spending. I want you to focus on inventory. As inventories rise, price appreciation will go down. If inventories rise enough to 10, 11 months, prices will start to decline. That's just the way it is. There's a beautiful graph between inventory and price appreciation, straight like that. right? There's nothing magic. Inventory. And as far as the Fed's concerned, look at inflation, it's at public enemy number one, and unemployment is closely related public enemy number two. We have to see inflation come down. We have to see unemployment rise before the Fed begins to start to even feel happy and give us a little bit of happy mood music. This is my name, my cell number, phone number, Twitter handle, email address. I put out 70 words on the economy. Sign up if you'd like. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.